Welcome to the Coder Catch Up podcast. My name is Jamie Jones, and in this episode, we're going to be talking about the features coming out in Rails 6 as Rails 6 is soon to be released. Okay, so Rails 6, it's coming out soon. It's estimated to have a final release on April the 30th, and basically to ship and celebrate that release will be happening at RailsConf in 2019. As usual, that's generally when these things happen. So that's really exciting. It's not too far away. As I'm recording, this is the 5th of April, 25 days out. I'm pretty excited. There's some great features, so let's go and discuss them. Now, one of the things you need to know about Rails 6 and something you have to do in preparation if you want to upgrade your projects is you will be required to have Ruby 2.5 or above to use the features in Rails 6. I haven't actually tested with an older version of Ruby to see if there's anything that stops you from working, but I assume that there'll be something that's going to blow up in your face. So something to be aware of there. So we'll start off with some of the major features, which are pretty cool. The first one is Action Mailbox. So from the docs here, I've got some notes. Action Mailbox allows you to route incoming emails to controller-like mailboxes. Now, this very much feels like the Mailman gem, if anyone has used that before. The Mailman gem can be a little bit fiddly to use in production. Now, I've used this on a couple of projects in the past, and there are some things that can catch you out that you have to be aware of. And it looks like they're mostly, if not all, solved with Action Mailbox, because it's like a first-class citizen. I don't know if they're using Mailman under the hood. I haven't actually looked, but it's quite nice. It works really well. So if you need to receive any emails and process them, this is fantastic. This is going to make it so much easier for you. You could ditch Mailman and just use Action Mailbox. One of the things you do need to note is active storage is required, so you will need to set that up. But getting Action Mailbox started is really straightforward. It's great. It's very much feels like the Rails way of things. So Rails action_mailbox : install, and then that'll install the bits that you need, any of the files, etc. And then it will also generate some migrations that you'll need to run DB migrate against, and you are good to go and start working with receiving your emails. Really great feature. I think that one's probably going to be a little bit underutilized. I think it's worth checking out and seeing if there's things you can do with that. It's quite handy. The next one is Action Text, which is probably the biggest one that's been talked about. And basically, Action Text brings rich text content and editing to Rails. I'm just reading this verbose from some docs from the Rails website itself. So it includes the Tricks editor that handles everything from formatting to links, to quotes, to lists, to embedding images and galleries. The rich text content generated by Tricks editor is saved in its own rich text model that's associated with any existing active record model in the application. Any embedded images or other attachments are automatically stored using active storage and associated with the included rich text model. It's got a very simple install with Rails action_text install and running some migrations again, and you're good to go. That's fairly simple to integrate. And Tricks is not a bad editor. It looks quite simple. It looks like you're not really going to get that much power out of it, but there's so much baked into it. I haven't looked at extending it or anything like that, but it's got some great features. I think if you were looking at something in the past, like maybe Redactor or something like that, this would easily replace it, in my opinion. I think it's a great addition, and it's a necessary addition. It's really making all these requirements where you normally have to go reach out and package it together and try and make it work. It's becoming a lot easier. It feels cohesive and it just works. So really nice to see. The next one, which I'm pretty excited about, is parallel testing. So parallel testing allows you to parallelize your test suite. So while forking processes is the default method, threading is supported as well, which is awesome. And basically, the benefit of this is when you run these tests in parallel, it will reduce the total time that your test suite takes to run. Now, I've not had a look at this with RSpec and how that's going to work. It is set up to use the default. So I'll have to see how that works. I haven't really played around with it. So that'll be interesting to see. But this one's a big one, especially if you have a fairly big test suite. It might take a considerable amount of time. You could potentially cut this in half or more, generalizing there. But big difference, and it's a big deal, I think. That one you should definitely look into when you upgrade. Even if you have a fairly fast-running test suite, try it out. There's nothing wrong with having something run a bit faster. And the next one, which might be super useful if you are using Action Cable, which is Action Cable Testing. So basically, there's testing tools now that allow you to test your Action Cable functionality. So your connections, your channels, your broadcasts, etc. Awesome. The next one, which I'm super excited about, it could have been super useful in another project I had in the past, but that's now gone dormant, is multiple database support. So Eileen, thanks so much. She ported this from GitHub into Rails Core. Brilliant feature. I think a lot of people are going to love this feature. I certainly would have loved to have been using it in the past. It would have made things a lot easier. Really excited to see that and see what comes of that. Next one is follow_redirect can include additional arguments. So pass along arguments to the underlying get method in the follow_redirect bang method. It's possible to pass parameters to the underlying get requests in it by adding an additional argument to that method. Quite nice if you're going to be moving things around, like if you've got something coming in, maybe like referrals and things like that. This is going to be a great feature and reduce a lot of boilerplate for you. The next thing, which is to do with performance, that I think is going to be fairly useful, especially if you've got quite a heavy app, is it adds allocations to template rendering instrumentation. I think this one, it might take a little bit more to dive in and work out exactly, but it's basically in Action View, it outputs the allocations of objects to the console, along with the whole render time and things like that. So that's super useful. I believe Aaron Patterson was leading this one, so thanks, Aaron. If I got that wrong, sorry, but I'm pretty sure it was Aaron. So yeah, these performance things make a big difference, and being able to see that you're allocating tons of objects might make you think about how you want to do something, or maybe adding some caching in or something like that to make it a little bit easier or a little bit faster. So next thing is file uploads now behave as you expect with active storage. So uploaded files assigned to a record are persisted to storage when the record is saved instead of immediately. So previously, when you uploaded a file, any kind of file, it would try and persist that record straight away, but you generally don't want that to happen. If something fails, the next thing you got like an orphaned record, and yeah, it's not nice and it's fiddly. So in Rails 5.2, they'll persist it immediately, but now it's actually doing it when you call save. So some record, you new it up, file goes up, still sitting there in limbo. When you execute save and it saves successfully, then the file is persisted to the database. It makes sense to me. I don't know why this wasn't the default. I'd love to know the conversation behind that, but it's fixed now, which is great. The next thing is the image processing gem is to be used over MiniMagick. So MiniMagick has been deprecated and is now being replaced by image processing, which has pretty much the same APIs. Your mileage may vary. But basically, support for some of the macros such as resize to fit and resize to fill. Those are the primarily ones that I use most of the time, 99% of the time, and has built-in libvips, which is an alternative to ImageMagick. So you're removing that ImageMagick dependency, which, depending on your needs, that might be good, it might be bad. Take it as you need, but of course you can always replace these things how you like. Basically, to configure this, you just have a config line in your config, rails.application.config.activestorage.variantprocessor, and you just pass it some kind of symbol like vips. The next one, which I think is pretty awesome, this is cool to see. I didn't expect something like this to be in there. It's to do with the auto loaders, and this is Zeitwerk. And basically, it's a new code loader for Ruby. It's efficient, thread safe, and matches Ruby's semantics for constants. I believe some people have had issues with constants before, and this might solve those. I haven't seen them. So basically, given a conventional file structure, Zeitwerk loads your project classes and modules on demand, meaning you don't need to write require calls for your own files. I don't know how I feel about this. Part of me is like, I'd like to have those requires in there. Auto loading is a bit magic, but at the same time, it's reducing lines of code, less things you got to worry about and think about. Yeah, I don't know how I feel about this one. I'm going to have to play around with it more in a bunch of projects to kind of get a good feel with it. But basically, to enable that in Rails 6, you use config.autoloader and you just pass it a symbol of Zeitwerk. The next one, which will be super handy, especially if you're doing any GDPR work, is filtering sensitive parameters. So if you're dealing with sensitive data that you want to hide from your logs and the console and all those kind of things, you can configure Active Record base filter attributes with a list of string and regex-based matches, and for any of those sensitive attributes, and they will be obfuscated in the logs and the console, etc. Awesome. Super awesome. I'm glad to see that. The next thing, there's been some updates to Railties, and this will just finish things out. There's a bunch of little things here. Now you can add an explicit option, which is --using or -u, for specifying the server for the Rails server command. So for example, Rails server -u Puma, and you'll now be using Puma. It's a lot nicer if you do need to switch and test, like maybe a development you're not running Puma locally, or maybe using Unicorn, something like that. Just a nice little quality of life thing there. Next thing is add the ability to see the output of Rails routes in an expanded format, which can really help depending on how gnarly your Rails routes are. Next thing is run the seed database task using inline active job adapter. So you can run all that stuff with active job, which is great. There's a command Rails DB system change to change the database of the application. So for example, SQLite to Postgres. This is really handy if you're just quickly stubbing out a project and you think SQLite's going to be fine. Next thing you need some Postgres, and going around and changing those files is really annoying to get it all working for Postgres. One command and you're off to go and ready the races. So I think that's a brilliant one. It certainly would have saved me a ton of time. Another quality of life feature. I think it's great. Add Rails test channels command to test only action cable channels. So if you're doing a lot of channels work and you just want to test those, nice little handy command there. A guard has been introduced against DNS rebinding attacks. You got the ability to abort on a failure while running generator commands. This is great. So if something happens with a generator and it blows up for whatever reason, I can't really think of one right now, but it will abort, which is great, and not leaving around any like child orphan files and having to like try and delete it. Yeah, nice one. That's really good. I haven't had that happen to me for a long time, but it's a lot better than what it was, so I think that's great. Next thing, Webpacker is the default JavaScript compiler in Rails 6. I'm excited about this. That trend's been happening for a while, moving towards making JavaScript more of a first-class citizen in Rails, and this is great. I think it's great. It's going to make things a lot better overall for your development experience and eventually for your end users because of the tooling you can use to improve the code you're writing. Next thing, multiple database support for the DB migrate status command. Again, this just follows on from multiple database stuff, and the ability to use different migration paths from multiple databases in the generators. So if you need to, have a certain migration for this database and this one for this, it allows that, which is great. Add support for multi-environment credentials, which is another one that's been coming up a bit more often than I've seen. And then make null store as default cache store in the test environment, which I think is really handy. It makes these testing a lot easier and a lot less error prone from my knowledge of it. So that's all I've really got for some of these Rails 6 features. I don't know if I've missed any. If I've missed anything that you think is worth talking about, discussing, please leave a comment on this episode at codercatchup.com. Send me an email at codercatchup@gmail.com, or even leave a tweet at codercatchup on Twitter and just let me know. Also, let me know what's your favorite feature coming out of Rails. I'd love to know what you think is going to be the most beneficial to you and why. I'd love to know, so just leave a comment. Of course, if you are loving the podcast and you're listening to this in your favorite podcatcher or whatever, like all that kind of stuff with that. If you're in iTunes, please give a rating and review. That helps me out a lot. If you are listening to this or watching this on YouTube, please leave a like and a subscribe. That'd be awesome. I'd really appreciate that. That's all I really got for this one. We'll catch you in the next episode. See ya.